Please welcome to the Town of Pelham's March Planning Commission meeting. If I could have a roll call to my left, please.
Carol Rainey Hunt,
Brad Valentine.
Tim Pritchard.
Kyle Eichhorn.
Jenny Sisson, Carol Hannah.
Thank you. We do have one missing. I could ask the board to review the minutes submitted. Any additions or corrections, and entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from 2/5/2025.
Thank you, Jen. Do I have a second? Thank you, Cheryl. All those in favor of the minutes as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Okay, old business, rezone for agriculture, large lot A1 to institutional I for a new church building. You folks were here last month. I think we asked for a survey.
Sir. Yes.
Hannah?
Do you need a light, that light on?
That would be nice.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, we got this new TV and I didn't know how bad the glare would be on it,
Is
but
that okay?
yeah, it seems to handle it quite well.
Keep you awake.
Didn't know they made traditional TVs. A thing. Okay, so, first, just wanna let you know, we have, converted to Teams from Zoom, and Google Drive. So if you have any questions about that, folder that you're in, it works like Google Drive, pretty much exactly the same, but just let staff know if you can't find something or it exits back to something else. The other thing, that we are working on with our IT department is there's a video delay if you are logged in to view this meeting online. Zoom didn't do that, but Teams does, and we're trying to eliminate it or make it very small. So that being said, when we go to open the public hearing, if there's no comments physically here in the crowd, Stephanie will type into the chat box. Public hearing is now open, so people can leave their questions or comments. And we'll leave that open for a minute at least because there is a 30-second lag delay on the video. So with that said, the other thing I want to just make sure we go through is for the presentation this evening, we'll do staff site presentation of the property and the petition. If the petitioner has anything they'd like to present, they're welcome to do that as well after that. And then questions for staff or the petitioner at that time. And then we'll do our staff analysis and then open the public hearing, close the public hearing, and then you'll have your vote. So I know we've kind of switched things up in, the last couple months, but that's how we're going to do it just moving forward. And I think BZA has already worked that into their process as well. So next slide, please. Or does the clicker work? You want to try it? Okay. We got enough to do going.
Sure. So to refresh you, the site is located off of 600 West. It's currently zoned A1, which is large lot agriculture. The property is 36 acres and that's outlined in yellow there. The proposed area of rezone is 10 acres of that parent parcel, and it's used as seasonal farming. You will notice that the property line has shifted. When the surveyor went through to make a legal description of the rezoned area, they actually found a NDOT right-of-way that was 50 feet wide. That's not on any of my maps. It's just an extra right-of-way they have. I'm assuming it runs mostly west if they ever want to expand 69. It's just an extra amount of room for them to do that. Their right-of-way is pretty large in that area anyway. But that's why you'll see that moved. It's just the parcel lines on my map there just does not reflect that. So it's a little bit finagled. Next slide, please. So the petitioner is requesting a rezone, like I said, from that large lot agriculture A1 to institutional zoning to do the following. They're looking to create a site for constructing the new branch of Solid Rock Church. If approved, after the rezone, the site will be split off to create a 10-acre parcel, and the petitioner will go through our site development review. Keep in mind that includes utilizing the standards of our UDO and any applicable standards of the corridor overlay that was just passed last year. The exhibit with the legal description is in your Teams drive. And like I said, the surveyor had found that there is an extra 50 feet of NDOT property, essentially right where that tree line is. So the acreage has all been moved up that 50 feet. To explain this graphic here, an access easement is going to be needed because 600, if you've driven down that road, stops kind of right where that black diamond is for the most part. So an access easement is going to be needed so that this property isn't landlocked. After further review, the thoroughfare plan does not call for 600 to be extended. So initially we had looked at getting some right of way here for maybe utilities, facilities for bikes and people and potentially a roadway, but that's not called for in our thoroughfare plan. And I can see the logic why. We probably don't want to pour more traffic onto that road as like a cut through. We want to utilize larger roadways with bigger developments to keep traffic on those big new roads.
Hannah, can you point out where the black diamond is, where
Oh, yeah, sure.
that would help?
New toy. That one might not show up.
Oh, there's the,
Yeah, you gotta go with the green.
but some of them don't show up on the TV screen, so it's right there.
All the way up there.
Yeah. So like you can kind of see, I mean, it's just barely, it probably needs some repaving. But 600, I'll get into it later. An east-west access roadway, which we've called the 146th Street extension, you've seen it on our thoroughfare plan, is proposed to eventually parallel 69 in some way, shape, or form. That's going to be development-driven construction. I'll show you on the next slide, and that this site would eventually have access to that roadway. Excuse me. The property next door is the Gaines property. We've already seen some proposals, that you guys have seen before on that property, but it is going to sell and develop soon. Whatever that is, it'll have to have a pretty large access roadway through it, or else it's just not navigable. So that'll continue west, and I'll show you more of that later. So where that diamond is essentially where 600 was cut off and was not maintained when 69 was built, which was back in the mid-ish 60s from the blueprints that I have. I have blueprints from 1960, and I assume that they weren't starting construction until mid to late 60s. So that road has not been maintained, even though it was a county road. The right of way there is more of a prescriptive easement. Property lines go to the center of the road. But the county and NDOT, I guess at the time, utilized prescriptive easements for roadways, which is the norm kind of out there. You'll see a lot of properties with center lines in the road. Their property goes in the middle of the road. So if we can go to the next slide, thank you. So this is just kind of what I was talking about, and we will get into this later because we have some proposed amendments to the thoroughfare plan. There needs to be an east-west connector from State Route 13 to 38. So like I said, we're working on amending this document to show a more updated route. If you look at where it is right now, I mean, it's a line on a map and that's all that it is. It shows that connection from 13 to 38. But this is not where it's going to go. So we're trying to put a more realistic arrow, bubble, whatever you want to call it in there. And it'll certainly reflect something more like this. So the road on the eastern parcel would be a portion of or secondary roadway to the 146th Street extension need. So that was an identified need by the market study that was done with that thoroughfare plan back in 21 it was passed. So it must have started in 20, maybe 19. I don't know with COVID how delayed it got. Anyway, so next slide, please. Okay, so before I get into my analysis, are there any particular questions for myself or the petitioner, or do you have anything you'd like to present at this time?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Doing a great job.
I covered everything.
Board have any questions? Yeah.
Okay, so the function of planning staff is to analyze the petition against the comprehensive plan, other approved relevant plans and ordinances, as well as any existing conditions or variances placed upon the site to present facts and analysis. So based on that analysis, staff has the following comments. The rezone does not pose any hazards to public health, safety, or welfare. required landscape buffers as well as distance from existing development, which is all residential, even with Baker's Point going in, does not impose any visual or noise concerns. I would also dare to say that it probably doesn't pose any traffic concerns with the amount that this will be used, as opposed to perhaps a different use. 600 West is currently under contract to be improved and widened. That was a part of the Baker's Point subdivision. Right now, we're working on 30% plans. So it is moving right along with getting those plans in place. An institutional use fits the interchange master plan for the highway mixed use area, which was recently updated. If you guys remember later last year, we had updated that. For other uses besides only residential, the Southwest quadrant was pretty pigeonholed into a strictly executive single family housing style product. And we discussed changing that and kind of adding the ability for other kinds of housing as well as along the highway uses that could be considered a little heavier, perhaps non-residential could also fit there. The size of the parcel fits the requirements for institutional zoning. And as I mentioned before, an east-west roadway is proposed to eventually run through the adjacent property, connecting this new parcel and others along its route to State Route 30 eventually. 600 West is not planned to be extended via the thoroughfare plan. It is not present in that plan. So the proposed east-west access road will be the route for development traffic. Eventually, all traffic for this site will utilize that road. I think some of the reason this was why 600 is not planned to be taken down any further than it is this prevents cut through traffic to State Route 38 from 600. Like I said, it was cut off in the 1960s-ish. And the maintained roadway ends kind of right where that diamond was. So I also have some potential conditions and commitments for the proposed rezone based on site-specific needs. Do you have any questions thus far? Do you want me to get through that first? Okay.
We're good.
Okay. Require egress access easement through the northern area of the parent parcel where the pavement for 600 ends. Can be a private driveway. This can be done in site plan phase or an admin plat phase. When you're doing one-off parcels like this, you have a little bit of flexibility with when you do things. So because this isn't a residential subdivision, it's not a commercial subdivision. You could plat this property off just as it is now. And when you come back to site plan, that's when you're doing easements. That's when you're doing right of way. That's when you're doing everything else when you have a better handle on site engineering, in case there's some things you run into. So the petitioner has the choice to do either, but I would require it one way or the other. The size of that easement, we do not have a standard for, so that's between the owner and the developer. The only thing that we have a size requirement for or minimum maximum is the driveway apron, the cut onto the road. It can't be larger than a certain width or smaller than a certain width. And then it has to be a certain amount of feet long. But after that, it's up to the petitioner how they create their private driveway. Require a utility easement in the site plan phase or again with an administrative plat to run utilities. This can certainly be within an egress access easement if that's the owner preference, or it can sit outside of it. I think if you look at that survey with the legal description, it does show a proposed 40-foot wide egress easement. Portion of that could easily be written and described for utilities. We have to run electric back there somehow, so it'll have to get to the site that way. Let's see, where am I? Those are usually, again, 20-25 feet wide. They're not that big. Require abandonment of private driveway off of 600 West when that new access road is built to parallel I-69 and allow a single point of access from the new roadway or frontage road off of that roadway. This is, going to be years down the road. We don't really know exactly how it could look. If the developers next door want to build a frontage road instead, it could come off of that and then have the large roadway. It's hard to tell. I don't have a crystal ball. But either one of those is fine. Require right-of-way dedication as deemed necessary and applicable per the UDO and our thoroughfare plan and the site plan review phase or the admin plat. This is something that is required in our UDO in Chapter 3, Section L.
And it also describes kind of what that process looks like if deemed necessary. And then the last one, if the petitioner builds parking lots on east or west parcel boundary area, require parking lot cross-access easement, excuse me, to surrounding east-west parcels, if and when those develop. The only zone that does not include, so if multifamily or general business goes here and general business goes there, those are considered applicable parking lot cross-access uses. If it's Baker's Point, that is not considered something that needs cross-access through a parking lot. And the point of that is that if you have businesses connected along a major roadway that, might not have a frontage road, it helps preventing, okay, I'm going to go here, turn out onto this road and then have to turn back into another place that's very close by. Kind of helps with those left turn motions, getting places, or, obviously right turn motions too. Just assists with those. And that is also required in Chapter 3, Section D of our UDO. Once, again, site development occurs and the site is engineered, so we know where those things are.
Okay, thank you, Hannah.
Any
questions?
questions?
Any
Oh,
questions from the board for Hannah? Petitioner, do you have any comments?
I don't.
No. Okay, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing now. For anybody in the audience, or is there anybody online, Steph?
It's hard to tell who's online and our Q and A may not be working.
This is our first road with
Working with,
teams. We're gonna get it.
We'll give it a minute, maybe they can hear us. Does anybody have any comments, Mr. Lord, or anybody?
Yes.
Oh. Step up.
All right. My name is John Lord. I live at 6982 South Lakeview Court out in Foster's Branch Ridge. My concern is just about 600, not about the use of it as the church. We know that it's going to develop. It's all about the traffic on 600. You mentioned the plan to improve it. You mentioned that percentage. I thought we'd get to the 30 plan or something. What does that mean exactly?
30% plans. Yeah, so it's like in phases.
Baker's Point is?
No, the roadway improvement, the roadway reconstruction.
Okay. Do you know what a time that will be finished?
I don't have a ballpark with me right now. I mean, we meet with our engineers tomorrow. I could probably get a better one at that point, but I know they've been working on it and under contract since the end of last year.
Great.
So-
So that's what our concern is. Our concern is just about the road. It's just
Yeah.
about the width of the road. We have a lot of people that walk that road. We're anxious to see that sidewalk come in. That's supposed to be there. We wish it was there now. We know it's coming. So that's the only concern that I have. Thank you.
Thank you,
And John, even though we might not have an exact timeline, like a date, because it's dependent on what the contractor does. So there's certain construction on that road. We can't start till he's done with his stuff. So depending on which phase he's at and when, that'll dictate our final construction. If that makes sense.
Sure. Yes.
But I do believe Hannah helped me out. The sidewalk is gonna be put in.
They have elected to just give us the funds to do that.
that's right.
And we'll do it with our reconstruction, so that way we're not ripping it up on accident when we do the roadway improvements.
Yeah.
Just as like in lieu of,
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
because we also have some storm stuff we're gonna be dealing with for 600. And we, again, don't wanna have to rip up new sidewalk if we don't have to. Okay, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And to add, I think that the timing of the construction for when the church would be ready to develop is going to be another 3-4 years out. So we would anticipate this roadway to likely be improved prior to the construction of this site.
Yeah, I agree. That'll all be done for the church ever built. They gotta raise funds.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody you think, Steph, or we?
It's currently not working. Q&A.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and close the we'll close the public hearing then. Pardon me?
There's 3 people listening.
Didn't raise their hand or? Okay. All right. With that said, we'll close the public hearing. Any other questions or comments from anybody from the board? With that said, I'll entertain motions for 2025-01 rezone from ag to institutional.
I'll make the motion that we approve the rezone.
Thank you, Brad. Do I have a second? Thank you, Tim.
Is that subject to the condition?
Subject to the conditions.
Yeah, okay.
I have a motion and a second to rezone the proposal 2025-01 with the recommended conditions as submitted. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I'm not aligned on that, but I just want to say thank you guys
Yeah.
so much
Glad that.
for the extra, absolutely, and thank you for the extra explanation last month. That really helped.
Well, we didn't mean to sound petty, but we needed that survey.
That's great. Actually, I'm glad we did it.
Yeah.
It worked out on our side.
It'll help you in the long run.
I think so, seeing that other, and so thank you guys. Church was very unified on that, so thank you for everything.
Thank you. But do we want to do the thorough plan first before we do the UDOs? You want to wait?
Survey in the end.
UDO amendments, we have two of them on the same spreadsheet.
Okay.
As long as that's okay, we can just do them all as new business.
We're going to UDO. That's fine. We just go, we're going same order.
Whatever you prefer, make a motion to take them out of order.
We're good. Go ahead, Ann.
Hey, can I ask real quick, what,
Thank you.
he wanted to know if this would be before town council next week?
That's up to town council.
Okay,
They have 90 days, but they're usually pretty good about putting it on
Okay.
right away. I've only seen them delay one once when you guys were Wednesday and then they were Thursday because it was a short month and they moved that to the next month, but usually they'll put it right on there. And we have the ordinance ready for them, don't we? We do. Okay. Okay. You can actually go back to the presentation. And just scroll on past staff analysis. Perfect. Okay, so I have some proposed updates to our thoroughfare plan. So the biggest one is going to be 146th Street Extension. This was identified, and I think I spoke to it a little bit before, as a need identified, and also it ties into the 146th Street, I think it's Innovation Mile that runs westward. However, this line on this map is a little hard to use when it's coming to development moving on the west side. And we have quite a lot, a lot of calls being interested in this area. So what I'd like to do is, if you'll go to the next slide, so that's the existing layout. You can see it goes through Foster's Branch and Baker's Point and all that. Is really just kind of split it up, kind of make it a little bit more realistic of a line. We have it curving up to meet 700. That can be kind of a bypass for people just trying to get to the highway. And then also it can go around to the south. Connection to 650 is going to be really important. And then, like I had spoken to earlier, along the Gaines property, along the Boyd property, and now the church property, there's not a lot of ways to access these properties without major roadways. There are some very small county roads out there, but as these large scale things develop, whether it's housing or maybe more heavier commercial uses along the highway or 700, there's not really it's in there, the basics, we need a road to connect these 2 points. But I think we just need to elaborate on the potential of where those things can go. So that's kind of the basis of it. And then the extension of that over to 800, again, I can see a lot of development going in and wanting to go in along the highway. And we're going to want to make sure that they have more roadways to access that and not, those county roads can only get so big and be used so well. So this is almost like if we look at North and South Heritage Way. Those are ways to access those properties and also get to other parts of town. So people coming from the west, it's kind of a copy and paste. Because if you look at 67th Street Extension and then how it goes into, you know, what I'm calling the 146th Street route revision through Jason Gaines' property. I mean, it's pretty much the same concept. It's just on the west side, we don't have nearly as many roads and ways to access things, where if we get large scale developments, it's just not gonna work. So I can see why that was identified, and it's very important. So this is just kind of a revision to that some of those potential connective points. None of this is engineered. They are just lines on maps, but they give you a better idea, I feel like, of how flow could eventually look if we looked at all this development over here. Now, the north side of this is something we also should probably go in and look at some point as well. You know, what kind of roads are we gonna potentially need up there? I only see 3 major roadways, and one of them isn't gonna be built for a very long time. So it just kind of helps us with development when it's coming through over here. What I don't want is a bunch of subdivisions that only have one access point and then that road gets destroyed, or, you know, it just can't take it. So that's kind of my main idea with, you know, what I'm calling a I-69 frontage road and the 146th Street route revision. And we've talked as well with Neil Smith. He owns quite a bit of property out here, just about, you know, kind of their general ideas with, you know, I don't know if you want to talk to that more, but just general ideas with the future and development, how that could, you know, occur in those areas. Because like I said, there's just not great access out there right now. Do you want to come up here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The pointer.
She's
Later.
Wrangler.
Okay. So, just a couple of things to add to, Hannah's comments. So these are more like, the details at the bottom of small print on the contract. So these are corridors, right? If they're dashed, they're not exact alignments. A lot of times the public sees that and figures, oh, that's going through my grandpa's house or something like that. So that's the main point I wanted to make. The other thing is, it's totally dependent on mostly farmer ground, agricultural ground, or other ground that sells. If ground does not sell, then the roads do not get built. The town, during rapid growth cannot afford to build roads. They need to be built by the developers. So no development, then these roads don't go in.
So that's like the Kulkarni property. They
Yeah.
are building North Heritage Way. They're like.
Perfect example of that.
Yeah.
So, if it's dashed, it's just a corridor, right? Any questions on the difference between alignment and corridor? Kyle, you want to explain?
Well, so I guess my question is, so if you have a large single user on the Gaines property and they want to put a giant warehouse right in the middle, are we gonna make them build a road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To connect.
Just
their
like we
gate?
did with Kilcarney, yeah.
Okay.
They'd have to, you know, shift it, or, you know, that, again, that is not
Yeah.
alignment. So if it
Point
kind
A
of
to point
waggles
B,
through the
yeah.
property, that's fine, but they have to dedicate the right of way and build their portion in some regard.
I will also say this, mostly for Kyle, that this is an update, right? Eventually we get to probably when the comp plan is done, then after that, we'll probably go through and actually model some traffic flows. And get more fine tuned what we need to do.
Because I think our, you know, part of that comp plan is updating the land, you know, proposed future land use map that, you know, we do use right now. If something's outside of the I-69 area, because that is a newer plan that takes precedent. So that can also help with that modeling. If future land use kind of areas show, you know, residential there, commercial there, that can help with that modeling, as far as I'm aware.
Scott, is Anderson abandoned 73rd Street or 77th or 73rd?
No, I mean, the most important thing that'll come out of that for them and for us is the alignment. The design, it's a very confusing project, and I have had to step away from it, just because when I was on the private side, I was involved in that project. But really, Hannah's the lead on the town.
It's not abandoned, but it's moving at a snail's pace.
They're on, yeah,
About it.
they're only obligated to build, because it's an earmark, it wasn't federal aid, it wasn't federal highway, it was an earmark in Congress way back probably 20 years ago. And so it has different rules. But generally, they only have to build a certain portion of it, and that's probably what, you'll probably see that built around the Nestle and NTN, that sort of thing. As far as coming down to the south, that's an unknown,
I think we'll probably have that built and developed
yeah.
before they do.
It'll be by developer.
Right, yeah, that's what I meant.
Right.
Again, same as Bull Kearney, as it develops north, it'll just connect to 132 eventually.
Right.
But if it doesn't develop, then it won't be built either. The other point I think is really important. So discussions with Ingalls and the county, this is being improved, 800 South, which is south of the interstate. And so that's an overpass, right? Eventually could be an interchange. But that's well into the future, I would imagine, knowing how NDOT's long-range plans work and their criteria for new interchange. The population here would have to be growing significantly, almost to the point of like what you see in Fishers. And 106th Street would be a good example of something where a high growth, high population kicked in a new interchange. And then for us, eventually, what they do, the improvements up to here, of course, Fall Creek Drive. Well, I should say Heritage Way South would, no, am I in the right? Yeah, Heritage Way South. It would be important, probably most likely Fall Creek Drive will be shut off when this is completed. And then, so you'll see a southern route. And then the intent of, and the hope of Pendleton, the intent of the county, Ingalls, and our MPO, MCOG, will be eventually somewhere down here, probably on either 650 or 750, a connection to 67. Right?
Yeah.
So,
There's always talk of that connector road coming around from 465 up through there.
oh, you mean the outer ring of 465? Yeah. Boy, I haven't heard anything about that for a long time. That last discussion was clear back Mitch Daniels was governor.
I thought when they got 69 done it far back up.
Mhm.
With regards to 67th Street, 73rd Street and the
Mhm.
extension.
Yeah.
Our position is still not to allow heavy truck traffic to Pendleton.
Sure, yeah,
I mean, that's townwide,
yeah.
right? Right.
But we don't have anything that stops trucks from cutting through town all the time, right?
Just ordinances
And then getting hung up.
and them getting hung up and, you know,
But we don't write tickets for them when they cut through.
I would.
I've had it, my yard tore up 3 times. in
Oh, I know.
3 weeks.
I know.
Man, and they don't do anything.
Didn't I chase one down on a lawnmower the other day? I did.
I was in a semi, that was a triaxle.
Supposed to lock it out there next to theirs.
Yeah.
And then I have one other, kind of very minor road, that I had wanted to add because I am getting a lot of development over here, which means this is gonna happen next. This is the North Heritage Way roundabout. If you remember, we just, approved a plat for a hotel lot, kind of right there by where Starbucks and the bank is. So imagine directly across the street to the east, nearly all the way to Fall Creek Drive is already pre-zoned general business, and it's all single-family housing right now. And some of it is rentals. I'm sure once the market gets there, that's gonna be a very hot commodity to develop. It's already zoned for business. I don't know when that happened. But what I would like to do, can we go to Google Maps? Okay, I don't know if this isn't a good visual truly. But essentially where Henderson Way is, if you imagine that road, right across the street across Heritage Way, we're going to need some sort of access frontage road, whatever you want to call it, because what we don't want is an entire quarter, of State Street there in between South Heritage Way and Fall Creek Drive to all have cuts onto State Street. We're trying to avoid cuts onto major arterials as much as possible. So I think almost like, again, a very small version of the Colcarney property, or kind of what we did with Baker's Point, where the 11 executive homes could not all have private driveway cuts onto 600. This would be like an access road through that eventually could either go to Fall Creek Drive or just cut back up to State Street. Because there's probably 6 lots there and they're big. And if you can't imagine, I mean, if those all developed, hardware store, Chick-fil-A, something like that, they all had a driveway, it's just gonna make the traffic and the safety of getting in and out of State Street worse than it already is. So it's very minor. It doesn't have to be big. It could just be a collect or a local roadway. And that's where those driveway cuts would come off of. Now, where it's placed, it can be super north, in the middle, super south. If however it works, but it's the same as anything else, would be developer driven based on when they come in to get, well, either rezoned if they need it or site plan or something like that. Thank you. Yeah, can you do the layers for satellite?
And there would be access roads on both sides of State Street? Both.
I'm not sure I understand what you mean. This
No.
would only be on the south.
North.
Yeah.
Private property.
Thank you. So if you go right over here, thank you very much. Zoom in just a little bit for me. Perfect. And then over to the left. Cool. So this is Henderson Way. Starbucks still shows it as Settlement Trail. Starbucks, Google. But this is all, except for this right here, is all zoned business. And so what I see in the future, unless someone buys up this entire thing, is a driveway cut here, a driveway cut here, a driveway cut here, a driveway cut here, and a driveway cut there. And that's not really what I think we want to try to do. So our access management code, our UDO, all those things calls for limitation on major, arterial roadways, secondary arterials, as much as possible. And so I think you extend this over, or it starts here. I mean, it could even, we have right of way here where we're building our trail. It could potentially be there. Exactly. It could be something like that. It'll just be developer driven. And these could all, I mean, these all do go down to our little right of way parcel here that goes all the way to the street, but it does. And there's a Rosa Fry ditch in here somewhere. So it might work, it comes in here and goes up like that. It's just an idea. It's a line on a map. So that way, when this does come up for development, we can go, we recognize we have a need here for an access road, a frontage road. You need to do it in some regard. And where it is kind of up to you. First person to the table, kind of gets to set the alignment. So looking at the rezone that we just did, kind of where that is, since that'll be accessed from that frontage road eventually they're kind of setting where it goes. Typically we don't see that. We would see like something like the Gaines develop first and then all these pieces come in after, but that's just how the cookie crumbled. So that's my last idea, is just something here, because I know this is going to develop soon, and none of these have had cuts onto State Street. Anything developing on Colcarney's property is not allowed cuts on State Street. They have to use their own little access roadways. So it's just kind of the trend in that area, that's going to be happening soon in that area anyway. The hotel lots here also did not get individual cuts for their 5 lots. They had to build their own private roadway, which is also fine if they want to do that. It has to be built to town standards. It's just we don't maintain it. That's up to the developer. But so they did that because we were not going to have cuts on Heritage Way. So that's my thoughts behind that.
And the opposite side of State Street is not zone business today.
This is zone business in this area and in this area.
What about farther to the east?
To the east over here, nope, these are zoned A2. I believe this one might be institutional. But, and then all this up here is A2, I know that. And then this is multifamily. So any questions on that? Any Other ideas? Kind of a lot of copy and pasting because we're seeing what works and making sure that the places that are gonna develop next, because I'd imagine this corner is gonna be really popular here soon and it's already zoned, so you got a lot of options with that.
Very good.
Okay, and then on the last page of the presentation, you'll see the updated project descriptions that I had put in there. The 146th Street, truly, I don't think it necessarily needs language update. I mean, it's getting something from State Route 13 to State Route 38. It never really spoke, I mean, it said to parallel 69. That can be a million different ways. The only thing that I would want to change, obviously, is the lines on the map, but the goal of that roadway is not changing. I'm happy to add anything if you'd like me to, but it's pretty well ambiguous. So it kind of works well, so that way we don't say, nope, it's gonna be from here to here through this yard and all that and connect to 38 there.
So the preliminary 146th Street extension intersection at 13
Yes, yes.
is the final intersection at 13 in the town of Pendleton, or is it going through Ingalls?
No, it's ours. We go right up to 13. Lapel shares half the road, on the north side. So I mean, that's where, the Indy Boat Co. and the concrete plant are. We're working with them right now on their roadway improvements and getting right of way, but we have been going through since Lapel owns half the road. It's making it a little complicated, but nothing we can't get through. So I guess that gateway will be, I mean, we'll maintain the road as far as I'm aware, but half the property to the north is Lapel's. It's their right of way. Technically, so. Well, we can put our gateway signage and things like that kind of on the south side. I'm not sure there are plans for development in that area. So. And then for the frontage road and I'm just calling it Henderson Way East, we can call it, whatever. I've got the project descriptions in there, action steps, and these are all new. They don't have any of these things. And then research, resources and parties involved. So you'll see those are relatively the same. I just kind of describe, the projects that I had just spoken to you about. So if there's any other parties involved or action steps you'd like me to add, let me know. Or if you think of some, we can always amend this document again in the future. But it has just kind of our basics, utilize right-of-way dedication and developer building requirements to prepare for expansion involving planning department, public works, MCOG, NDOT if necessary. Pretty general. And these would go in the 146th Street is a long-term goal. The I-69 frontage road would also be a long-term goal. And then Henderson Way could be a medium-term goal. I see development in that area occurring a little bit quicker, just because of what's going on there right now. So any questions on that? Do we open up a public hearing on this as well? Okay. From the crowd, allow Mr. Gardner.
Yeah.
Yes.
If we do the business park there on 38 on State Street, will you require a sidewalk along there?
Yeah, it'll be a sidewalk or a path. If it's found to be, we have to make sure point A that connects to point B is a safe route and a feasible one. So, which I have no doubt it will be. I'd rather things kind of be off State Street, not an access road because State Street's so busy. That would be my ideal. Does that make sense? So like that access road would have trails on it, but maybe not necessarily State Street.
I'm just trying to figure out.
So we have a business park trail we're working on right now. We were awarded money from MCOG. Would you mind scrolling back up really quick, please? I'll show you where that is. So that trail here's the bridge. Will connect here by Starbucks. They already built their portion. Oops. Oh, no, you're good. So it'll come across here, come down, and then where that kind of right of way is that the town owns. Back behind CSW, it'll cross here, come down Fall Creek and cross on Taylor. So we'll have another bridge over the creek, that'll get you from the business park area to downtown on Taylor.
That'll be a pedestrian bridge, correct?
Yes.
The bridge-
So essentially, the only part that's missing is the Gaines property, because Baker's Point has to build their portion of the trail. Whatever builds here will have to, and then Mystic Waters has their portion done because NDOT did it back when they did the roundabouts. So we're just kind of at this point waiting on that big middle piece to get the west side connected over here.
That's
Mhm.
it.
It's in great shape, I'm told.
See work out there.
Yeah, I think they were out there this week or last week, weren't they, doing some trimming?
I know, I think the engineering firm that's handling that part of the work has been out there to look at it, and then I think the guys, what you probably saw was them weed whacking around it so that the engineers could look at it.
Yeah, I saw the engineers went back.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah, United.
Yeah.
Yep, that's them. Needs a new coat of paint. Okay, any questions on that? We'll move on to you, open the public hearing, move on to the UDO after.
So is there gonna be a motion to make the format changes and the text changes? Is that what we're?
We're gonna do the public hearing first.
After the public hearing?
Is that what you would recommend, just the amendments as listed in the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
So we can go ahead and open the public hearing now. Your comments, Stephanie, anybody? Okay. Anybody else in the audience? Comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Now we can entertain a motion to accept the changes submitted to the thoroughfare plan. What do you want to call it, 146th Street extension or?
Since there's a few, we might just say the listed changes, omnibus changes,
Omnibus changes. Okay,
all encompassing.
all encompassing. We have a motion in a second.
Yeah.
That was spelling, spelling.
I know.
Thanks, Kara. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor of the omnibus,
Ominous.
ominous corrections and additions to the thoroughfare plan, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you.
Okay, next for you, I've got UDO amendments. Whenever you get a second, go on down to those. So two of these are, it's in a separate Excel. Yeah, sorry. Two of these are continued from your meeting last month. They pertain to accessory structure standards. And then the other is ADU standards, so sort of an accessory dwelling unit standards. So that is very zoomed in, isn't it? Huh. There we go. All right. So, what Denise and I have found, is that we have really good standards, for accessory structures. However, there is some ambiguity when it comes to what, clearly subordinate means, height, it uses height, bulk extent, and purpose. So what I would like to do is just maybe string that a little bit closer together. I certainly, I'm not trying to pigeonhole anything. But, I try to keep the UDO as clear and, usable for, all situations where, in 5 years, we're still going to use kind of these same standards. It's the set of the standards so that, somebody else is working here, something else comes in, they go, well, I think, as long as it's a square foot smaller than that primary structure, it's considered subordinate because that's how I interpret it. So, we haven't necessarily seen anything where it's given us heartburn, but it's something we've considered when people have asked us about how small a structure or how large a structure can be. So what I would like to do is we found some accessory structure standards from Fishers, Noblesville, Greenville, and Ingalls. And most of them, they're in your G drive, sorry, Teams drive there. It's called accessory structure standard something. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. So you can kind of see there's some variety in how they do it. Some of them do it by the size of the parcel. Some of them do it by, here's a set limit. You can be 50% of your primary structure or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. You know, there's kind of a lot of variety. So I think really just putting in like a simple percentage would work really well to start. We know we can move this document if something's not working, but it kind of gives us some direction. If someone comes in with something and they're like, I have 1,000 square foot house and I want a 900 square foot accessory structure that is not related to agriculture, because those are not, those are exempt. We can say, that might not, that's not subordinate enough. So that's kind of where this came from, is because we have had some inquiries. They haven't gone forward with trying to pull permits. But it just kind of came to our attention, like, what exactly does that mean? So, and it's not defined in our UDO either. So, I like the percentage route. I've seen 50, I've seen 80, kind of all over with the places that we have looked. So I suggested 75. We can go up, we can go down. And that's for also includes all structures kind of on the property. We also don't limit the number of accessory structures, whereas a lot of other places do. So that might also help that too. Again, not agriculture related. But you know, that just kind of gives us more direction. So that's my thoughts on that. Any questions, comments, ideas, you know, more or less?
So I think there was some discussion about in relation to historic structures and how tall some of the houses are in town.
Some of them are pretty tall.
Right?
Yeah.
So I just would, number one, I wonder why we don't limit the number of structures per acreage or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I think percentage makes good sense. I think we need to be mindful of what that percentage is.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
for the look of the property, because it could
Sure.
really be different depending upon.
Sure. And this is, and I'm sure you can tell, I mean, this is mostly geared towards residential areas. Commercial and industrial zones also have the ability to have accessory structures, but they tend to be, I mean, those are much larger scale projects anyway, that it's not like a residential neighborhood. So mostly what I had looked at was residential uses. Our accessory structures standards are applicable to all zones unless you are using it for agriculture. So those standards kind of go through everything. But like, I don't know, in a commercial zone, your accessory structure can be like 35 feet tall because the max is 55. So it, you know, it's scaled up in that way. So, but yeah, so what do you think is a good percentage? Like I said, I've seen anywhere from 50 to 80, based on the research that we've done. So I just threw out 75, kind of in the middle, kind of not. We could do 60, 65. Beg pardon?
So you can have 10 accessory structures, but the total
That,
footage,
that's how we'd have it written, because we do not have a limit on the number of them. So yeah, if you had 10 teeny tiny ones, yeah, they would be cumulative. So if each one's 100 square and, you know, you're only allowed 400 square based on your primary structure size, you could only have 4.
and then you couldn't exceed the total impervious.
Impervious as well, yeah. And that was something that was kind of mentioned in some of the other standards, but I know ours is pretty strong with that one, so. But yeah, open to suggestions on percentage, just kind of want a better direction so that we're not.
Kind of sounds fine to me, but I
Mhm.
don't know.
But then 50 sounds too low.
Right, 65? That's in the middle.
Go 50, they can always ask for variance.
There's that too, yeah.
And it's at the ground floor area of the primary
Mhm.
structure.
What have the very few that we've had been, what percentage?
Have we had any that are for size? I think the only ones we've had are for height and setbacks. which I'll get to heights next for sure.
Okay.
Um,
And I think that's what everyone's,
They
Yeah.
fall well under, they've met that impervious surface max, and it's
Right.
not required that variant, but yeah.
Yeah.
it's like that.
it's just, I wanted a little more direction on that so that I could make sure everybody's treated the same way when something comes in and it's not like as interpretive, but I'm not trying to pigeonhole it.
we could do 50 and then again have variances and then as those come through the BZA, if it becomes
Right,
such an issue, then that
Right.
means maybe the standard does need tweaked and we should come back
you start somewhere.
to this meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Which leads me into kind of my next point. Oh, sorry, Brad.
So what is the current maximum square footage for an outbuilding today?
There isn't one.
1,200 feet at 1,200.
No,
We don't.
we charge more over 1,200.
It's just subordinate. So-
It's subordinate. So if you have a
Without getting a variance, right?
no, that's just the price. The price goes from 0 to what, 120 and then 120 to 1,200 and then
Yeah.
1,200 and up.
Yes.
Yeah. So the standards do not list a max size. They do for accessory dwelling units, but that's a whole other bag of badgers. But for this, it just says clearly subordinate in height, bulk, extent, and purpose. So if you have a 6,000 square foot house, you could, I mean, right now you could build a 5,000 square foot garage, you know, because our code has written that openly. So that's why I'm looking for that kind of direction. But no, we don't have a max on size. But we do have a max on impervious surface. So again, that would only work if you had, what, like a 12 acre property, something large.
I like the 50. Take it back, take it
Yeah.
back to BZA.
Sure. Okay, and Denise, I did not have my list in front of me, so if you wouldn't mind just making notes with what percentages
Yep,
they'd like.
yep.
So that leads me to kind of my next point with the heights. We have had a lot of height variances. We've had 4, which I know doesn't seem like a lot. But we've also had way more inquiries from folks and they're like, oh, you know, can I do 16 feet? Can I do 18 feet? You know, something like that. And a lot of, not that, you know, I think something that is prefabbed is by any means, you know, junky or anything, but like, you know, a lot of those are kind of set at a certain size and they're, you know, can be very nice. And so it kind of, it makes it hard for someone if that's what they can get. If it's 17 feet tall, I can't give you a permit for it, you know? Because again, mostly in I'm looking in residential. Those height restrictions are at 15 throughout the board. Commercial places much higher. So I think because we have had variances, we have had a lot of inquiries, we have had a lot of folks where we've had to send them back to the drawing board if they're not interested in getting a variance. We looked again at some other places that I had mentioned earlier. Theirs is either they have a maximum, most of them have a maximum height or cannot exceed the primary structure, whichever is less. So they use a whichever is less. So say the maximum height for an accessory structure in any zone is 18 feet and my house is only 14 feet tall. I can't build an 18-foot tall garage. It has to be 14 or below. So I think that we could heighten ours to maybe 18 or up to 20, but no taller than the primary structure, whichever is less. I don't really know the typical height on like a 2-story. I think it depends on how decorative the roof is, really. So, but that's kind of what I had seen in other places. I had seen one up to 25, but they allowed primary structures up to 35, which in most of our zones we stop at 30. So that might be why.
So is that measured to the peak of the roof? Because I remember like in our old ordinance, it was like mid-gable. Or something.
It used to be 2/3 the way up the rake.
So that's,
As far as I know, it is to the peak. It's measured to the peak.
Our old code used to be between the peak and then the wall.
Had to do a lot of math. So that's my suggestion. Again, open to, you know, whatever you guys might think, or if, you know, you want, we stuck kind of in the local area. If you want me to look at code books outside the local kind of area, I'm happy to do that too and see what they reflect.
On those variances, would 18 have been enough?
Mm-hmm. I think,
17.
Okay.
and again, starting point, we find that we're still getting more and more and more. We can bump it up, reassess it, fluid document, so.
I think the only variance we'd have would be super tall historic structures. But this captures,
Majority, yeah.
So at 17 feet, what kind of roof pitch are we talking here, Mr. Roofman?
That's how wide it is. Wider the lower.
We have minimum pitch requirements, right?
Yes, we do. And I think it
6'12"?
12 to 12. Does that account for different roof styles? I mean, we feel like a Mansard roof. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, sorry.
I think 18 foot or no taller than primary seems
Yeah.
reasonable.
Okay, excellent. So should we go through the last continued from February and then have them vote on that set and then move to the new set? Yeah, or if it's okay to do it all at once, we can do that too. You tell me what's better.
I think it's probably better to just go through them individually.
Okay. And then adopt them all at the end? Okay, sure. So the next thing that we have, we'll do 50% and then 18 feet or no taller than the primary structure, whichever is less. Our accessory dwellings, oh, yeah, what's up, Willie?
Just as, my house is 1,700 square feet and my building is 1,200. Okay, and it's considered very average home.
Mhm.
Okay, that's 70% right there.
Mhm.
So I think the 50 is gonna create a lot of people want variances.
Mhm,
I think you should go back like you said, 75% or 65 or something. I
mhm.
don't think 50 is enough. But this is my opinion.
you're gonna have to take your phone down.
What?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to.
Hey, now, that's not how that works. Let's not ruffle any feathers. And show up with a bulldozer at Willie's house tomorrow.
The max is 1,200 square feet for.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. Back with the old code. Gotcha.
Guess we'll see.
Sure. I mean, yeah, we can do that.
Or something.
Right, yeah. So accessory dwelling standards, we ran into some issues with our ADUs and how they coexist with just an accessory structure. So looking at other codes, around the area, we have a really well-written portion for the ADUs. It's way more in-depth and detailed than anything Denise and I could find, which is why, like, I don't have all that much to bring to the table. I'm just trying to pick your brains on it. Because there's some things in there, like, for example, we had someone come in with a 25-foot tall structure, right? Which is the maximum size for an ADU, as long as your home is that tall, right? Or does it go off of primary or is it irregardless?
Yeah, it's.
Irregardless, okay.
25.
And it had a, accessory dwelling unit incorporated into a portion of it. And it had its own kind of like smaller roof area. And we were like, well, our code book says that an ADU cannot have its own accessory structure, AKA a garage. And that if it is for garage purposes, it can only be 15 feet tall, but it has this ADU within it. So can the whole thing be 25 feet? Can it not? Is that considered its own accessory structure? What if we have an owner that says it's not for that, it's for something else. It's something separate. Like, it's just something where I think we might need to, I don't know if that's a workshop where we find some resources, we bring you in and we try to figure it out. But I just want to make sure, again, like with the accessory structure standards where it's was a little subjective, I want to make sure that when these come in, it's following what the code was originally intentioned for. Which, I've been here for a very large portion of this, but I wasn't here when it was written. So I just want to make sure we're handling those right. It's a new kind of housing style. It's especially new to Pendleton, but it's getting very popular. So if there are certain restrictions that you'd want to see, within those standards, it's in chapter 3, accessory dwelling standards, it's part B. So that's kind of what I'm looking for from that, is I have these questions. I want some clarity to make sure that this is being, exercised in kind of
This-
the way
this
that you
is
want.
A small barn with a side room for entertaining. Is that what you're?
No, it's,
Am I-
it's a living space, so it has to have
That's
its
what I was
own, yeah, it has
a
to
little
have,
kitchen and all of that.
yep, it has to have a closet, a bathroom, bedroom, things of that nature.
And it's becoming popular here for rental purposes, or what are we seeing?
Well, rental,
Or like mother-in-laws, which is, I'm looking for one of my son's house.
I would say a little of both.
Okay.
Some folks kind of, I know some, there was recently someone who kind of like purchased a property and inherited it and didn't really know what to do with it. But again, that also gets into like our long-term rental, or not, if they're doing Airbnb, that's a whole other bag of badgers, but like just for mother-in-law suites, I think, also for, kids, family who, are gonna be living there, going to college, something like that. And then also, yes, some rentals, long-term rentals.
So if you put in an ADU,
Uh-huh.
not allowed to subdivide existing lots, correct?
Yep, nope.
So the way to get around subdividing existing lots is to put in an ADU, one or more, correct?
You can
'Cause it-
only have one, as far as I'm aware, in the book. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I'm pretty sure it's only one unit per primary structure.
Okay, so you put in an ADU, does that become a multifamily property?
Mm-mm. No, our
So-
zoning allows, in most zones, some, well, actually, I think all of them allow ADUs by right. No, it's just permitted as a use that's allowed in that zone.
Okay, does that allow them to have a separate address
Mhm.
for that unit?
Yep.
So like 104 and a half,
Yep.
or however they do that?
Yep.
It
Unit
actually
A.
requires, our code book requires a unit number for that unit. Kind of like the log cabin rule is where it's based out of in the state. So it is a allowed use per state statute. So that's where it is allowable within all of our zoning districts or within our residential zoning district. So the zone still stays the same. It's just an additional use of space, on that property. That is, whether it's family, intended for the owner or family of the owner. Some of the ordinances that we've read is restrictive to family members. Ours is not. But,
Mhm.
So in other words, we have no restrictions, they can turn it into a rental property.
As long as it meets the standards of the building code and the, size requirements, parking space, things like that, yeah.
So you
Well,
got-
What were you gonna say?
I don't think that it could be technically used into it as a rental. Because that would be a
No.
short term.
No, long-term, long-term, yeah. No, that's allowed.
Family living, it would not be a rental, technically classified as a rental space.
We've already seen additions and building that were intended for family who less than a year later became rentals.
Yeah, I don't,
So,
I don't think either police it.
no,
no. No,
So if your primary structure is only 15 foot, you can have a 25-foot tall ADU. And I think the standards for an accessory building and an ADU should be the same, like the 18 feet
Mhm.
less than the primary.
Yeah.
And you won't have this confusion on, oh, it's a garage or it's an ADU.
Yeah, let me double check on that if it has the whichever is less, because it probably does.
So, but if we just modify the maximum height of an ADU to match the maximum height of an accessory structure, it gets rid of that.
Anybody.
It gets rid of that confusion.
Mhm.
And as far as an ADU having its own accessory structure, I think that means another separate building.
Separate building. Okay.
Attached together. And we
Yeah.
say that it's 18 feet or less than the primary, then.
Yeah.
I think that helps clear it up maybe.
Yeah, no, like, that helps a lot. Like, is that, you know, part of it or not? So. Okay, so. Let's see. You want to change the max height, oops, of an accessory structure to match, or excuse me, accessory dwelling to match accessory structure?
And then I think the ADU has like an 800 square foot cap. Is that
Mhm. Yep. It's 800 square, 50% of the primary structure, whichever is less.
800 square is the minimum for residential.
In our smallest zone, yeah, the footprint, the ground floor footprint is 800. Okay, so ADU max height, got it. And then, I will then clarify, you know, an accessory dwelling shall not be permitted to have its own detached accessory structures. Is that how you mean to say it?
I mean, I think by definition, accessory structure means that it's another building, so.
Okay.
I don't know that it needs.
Any additional building.
Okay.
But I guess, no, like if you have a house and you build an ADU and then next to the ADU, you build an accessory for the house. That's the confusion, I guess.
Right.
But you can't stop that as long as you're under the 50%.
Right, yeah, exactly. So
So-
who's actually using it, you know, is.
So does the square footage of the ADU contribute to your 50% cap on accessory structures?
That's, I mean, it is an accessory building. It could, yeah, I would think it would. What do you think? I don't think we have clear definition or,
So like if you have 1,000 square foot house and you have a 500 square foot ADU, then you can't build any other accessory structure.
it's not necessarily written that way. With the way that we just, kind of amended it, as long as you're still meeting your, threshold. Well, I'm trying to think impervious,
Pervious.
the maximum impervious.
And that
Yeah,
ADU
so-
would not qualify as minimum of 800 square feet, so it would not be suitable for
Living.
living.
Well, the ADU can be less.
ADU can be less than,
Has to be a minimum.
It's capped at 800.
But the minimum for living space and zoning was 800 square feet.
that's for a primary
For
structure.
a primary.
ADUs can be as small as 220 square, and up to 800 or 50% of the primary structure, whichever
I
is
mean,
less.
there's still some homes that aren't even 800, this little post-World War II homes. Some of them are in the 700s.
Okay, so all I'll do is just amend the ADU height to match accessory structure. So we'll do up to 18 feet or no taller than the primary structure, whichever is less. And then again, if we're finding issue with that, you know, someone wants to build a loft space, they need more space up top, whatever. We can also look to re-amend that. I'm not sure where 25 came from. You know, I figured these would be pretty condensed, small things, but that's where I kind of was like, well, maybe the, you know, accessory structure or dwelling is meant to be in a garage or something, and those are much bigger, so. I'm not sure where 25 came from, but it's definitely different than our usual accessory structure, which up till now was only 15 feet. So,
With all the houses now that are being built, what is the height of those structures, the two-story structures that are going in on slots?
Baker's Point,
Baker's Point or up in Cary Glen,
I'd have to look. I'm not really sure.
530?
Mhm. All right. Okay, so unless there's any other questions or comments, I'll just change that one aspect. So any other discussion on that? Okay, next thing I've got for you is an amendment to add to our fee schedule, which is in subsection D. of chapter 7, collection of fees. So we'd like to just add, the reference to ordinance 20-24, which states that any additional engineer review or inspections for subdivisions, projects, storm, things like that, is paid by the developer. We obviously have a separate ordinance for it, but kind of just helps to have it referenced a few places. So I'd like to just add that subsection. Any questions on that? Okay. Next two I've got, number 4 and number 5. These I'd like to just open up for discussion. I want to know, what your direction is on these, if you want me to pursue it, if you don't. But with, our last BZA hearing of short-term rentals, we decided to go back and kind of look at what our potential revocation denial process looked like. And we do have one. It does exist. There's a way to do it. But it works a little bit more through the unsightly, unsafe ordinance. And we just recently passed a hotel license ordinance last year, if you'll remember, that has a really good denial revocation kind of standards within it. So we're working with council to kind of see what our options are and how to use that with short term, since they do have to register, they do have to get a permit every year, to make sure we have the tools that we need if we do run into a bigger problem where it's not even necessarily an unsightly property. Maybe it gets, police calls every other day, something like that. But I check with Lucas once, if not twice a year, on all of our listed Airbnbs. There has never been any calls to any of them, except medical. There have been medical calls. And then one was for someone running in a black hoodie. So we don't really have issue. It's just
How many total do we have today?
9. And so, not really causing issue, but, good to have as a backup in case we ever need to flex that muscle. So we're working with council. I had suggested maybe some of the language that we have from our hotel license ordinance that's very specific to that section, talks about how that revocation and denial is handled. We will have to, we can utilize what I see 36-1-24. That's the limits of our kind of disciplinary abilities.
Just as a point of clarification, Indiana Code expressly sets forth prohibitions and limitations can be set forth at the municipal level for short-term rentals. It's one of the few areas, Title 36, where we get really far into the weeds, which you can and can't do. And so we're working with planning staff to kind of figure out what their recommendation would be against that backdrop.
Yeah.
How about long term? I think that's the bigger problem.
Long-term is not nearly as good. It's a lot more discretion.
We got that next.
There's a lot of subdivisions that are close to our town. Summer Lake in particular is over almost 30% of those now.
Yeah. I've got it on the list, Tim, don't you worry. So just wanted to keep you're aware. So that will probably eventually be an amendment to the UDO. It might even have its own kind of ordinance, like the hotel motel ordinance
I would think
license
it
has,
would, since it has
something like that.
a
Yeah,
little bit of a judicial.
right. So just, and as long as that's all right, I'll proceed to continue doing that.
Yes.
Long-term rentals in subdivisions. So we were made aware that Fishers is trying to do something with their code book, their ordinance, to limit the number of long-term rental properties. So these are not Airbnbs. These are, 6 month to a year long rentals in their single-family residential neighborhoods. They proposed no more than 10%. I don't really know where they are in that process. I think it's been heard once, but they probably have a lot of homework to do after that, after it was presented. So we're kind of following that, and also at the same time, we'll be trying to kind of build something similar and maybe see how that pans out. There's been a lot of groups involved in that are against it, that are for it. There's certainly some legalities we'd have to go over, what, again, our limits are with being able to do that, where it can go, the code book, the UDO, or its own separate ordinance, things like that. But if that's, again, okay with you, I'll continue pursuing it to potentially amend the UDO to reflect whatever those changes need to be.
So what's the overall objective? To limit the amount of homes being purchased by the big investment houses and turned into
Corporate rental, yeah.
corporate rentals?
Yeah.
Just rental property.
But another aspect is the additions that are HOA, the more rentals there are, especially the corporate rentals, then that lessens the power of the HOA. So when the residents take over, they can never meet quorums. And that becomes a huge problem.
Right,
And so we want to get ahead of that.
right.
How do you police
I don't know how you
long-term
go,
rentals?
yeah. How you-
We'd have a registration program, I'd imagine. Or when it comes into, wasn't there something that Fishers had proposed?
Yeah, it would be a registration, that would be subject to, reapplying when there was a change of ownership. So it wasn't an annual.
Okay, that's what it
registration
was. Okay.
process, but did that review and that application, and then at that time, then they would analyze then that percentage per that subdivision to make sure it did not exceed that threshold. That is what they're proposing.
I see it being set, at least for new stuff, in like the rezone phase or commitment thereof or something like that.
Well, there's some-
Sure, I'd see it, but I'm not an attorney, so.
All that's gonna do is the corporate landlords are gonna go buy 10% and hold them for 100 years, and so there's no mom and pop landlords anymore, is all that's gonna do.
There's a company that's out there right now on 50,000 houses.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, I've heard a lot about this occurring,
Every repo there is, they're buying it up.
yeah. So,
Every district, whether it's Summer Lake or Fox Run or whatever, they're buying.
mhm.
They rent it for 2,000 to 8,000. They're renting.
I know,
I don't know how you ever stop it.
Well, that's why we're kind of looking at Fishers to see how they're doing it and
Nobody
maybe,
owns a subdivision.
yeah. I don't know,
but
but
it does create that HOA quorum issue. And I know Fishers started enacting their ordinance process because after they approved an entire development, then another developer came in and bought it all.
Well, there's the development south of Summer Lake.
mhm,
There's an Iranian family bought the whole freaking street.
mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, again, we can continue to pursue this, see what the options are, present them to you, and then, you know, if that's digestible at the time and we want to do something like that, we can. If there's other issues that come up, you know, it's certainly not set in stone. We don't have to do it, but it's just something we've been hearing a lot about. I hear corporate rental fears quite a bit.
What percentage of the homes in Pendleton currently are rentals?
We have that statistic from Genevieve, but I don't recall what it is off the top of my head.
That number was not really exactly just in our residential subdivisions, even in our downtown. We have a lot of rentals within our downtown area as well. It was a lot higher than what we anticipated prior.
Yeah, but I don't know how many homes that is. It's a percentage of rental, you know, properties. So I don't know how many people that is, but I know that she had presented that at one of our steering committee meetings. The information is there, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
But just like short-term rentals, having that registration process, especially when ownership changes, is important because the corporations change and they're not changing their property tax card records.
Yeah.
Because it's all being purchased by another larger company. And then if there are issues,
Well,
no
we've
one knows
had
who
that.
owns it.
I mean, not that we have any corporate subdivisions or, you know, presently any issues with that, but we have had quite a few like out of town landlords, potentially out of country landlords where, you know, it's not on the tenant to take the brunt of it. If, you know, it's in their contract that someone's going to mow the lawn and they don't come and mow the lawn, it's not their fault, but we have no one to cite. With, you know, even when we go and cut the lawn ourselves, we send the bill to the property card. You don't know if it ever gets there, and you know, that process just repeats and repeats. So,
I think the addition to this too is we eventually need to exercise or have in place the ability to inspect long-term rentals. Bloomington and Purdue or Lafayette, West Lafayette have those in place for obvious reasons. Because you do get landlords, we've had several problems where landlords, they weren't keeping water leaks, wouldn't repair them. Would rather, it was cheaper for them to just pay the extra $15 a month and additional a water bill for a slow leak. They just wouldn't maintain it. So that's the other avenue it opens up for us too.
I just got a renter from the trailer park by the region. That's owned out by some people out of Chicago, I believe. It's horrible out there.
Yeah, that's an example of,
Open rooms, they got leaking water, they got no heat.
Yeah. It's not great. So, you know, we're very preliminary, but, you know, things that I don't exactly have, you know, an exact, amendment that I'm looking to have done, you know, like the infrastructure, review fees. I want to just kind of present to you and then, you know, have you give me the go ahead if that's something we want to continue looking into or not. So,
Yes.
I'd keep an eye on Fishersville close to what happens.
yeah, we have been, yeah.
So just to clarify for me again, a little slow today. We do not have currently a long-term rental registration process in Pendleton.
Short term.
So one of the things that would have to be implemented would be a long-term rental registration process.
Mhm.
That would then give us an accurate count as to core town of Pendleton, historic district, however we want to parse it.
Mm-hmm.
What percentage of single-family dwellings are currently under rental?
Well, and I mean, the utility office honestly can probably pull a portion of that pretty quickly based on if there is because to get utilities, you have to have your lease contract with your landlord and they have to keep it on file. So there's probably a way they might be able to pull something like that for us pretty. Unless the landlord's providing utilities, yeah,
We
absolutely.
track where homestead exemptions
I don't.
are. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even have that on parcel.
Fisher's, ordinance is to have, support of that, yes.
The problem is there is a statewide system and some people have double because they own one in one county and one in another, and they have two homesteads, which they're not supposed to. But we don't have a centralized monitoring system.
Hey, don't get any ideas.
Nor is there a way to fully report that. It's different in every county. If you want to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
rat someone out.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily a centralized system to do so.
So if I were an out-of-state real estate investor,
Mm-hmm.
I would go through and purchase a home. I would get the property. I would ensure that the lot size was adequate to put on an ADU with minimum square footage to be a second standalone structure so that I could have two rental incomes off a single property.
I mean, you gotta have a primary structure that meets the minimum standards before you build an ADU. But we
If I'm
have,
coming in as purely a real estate investor. I'm not looking to live here. I'll never live here, just like most of the
Mhm.
developers that are developing the communities.
Yeah.
That would be a play that I would look at.
yeah, you could. I mean, we don't regulate who is in the building or not. It doesn't have to be owner occupied. So,
It's a growing problem. People can't afford houses
Yeah.
Yeah.
mhm,
and the rental market is on fire.
mhm.
And an investor can pop in at 25% above the market price and acquire it.
Let me tell you, these guys got a lot of money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
So,
I think our involvement is, we got to protect the property values and it's just, if it gets, the numbers
Yeah.
get so high, then
I don't really see this, you know,
Condition of the overall condition of a town could
Mhm.
degrade very rapidly.
Yeah.
Well, and even the people, the health, safety and welfare, there's
Health, safety.
three things as a town we should always revert back to.
yeah,
This does that for the renters. They're not, they're
Right.
young or they don't wanna
Well said.
have a mortgage.
Yeah.
And if something happens, they find out they have black mold issues,
Yeah.
from the doctor. They're
Yeah.
gonna look at the town and say, why are you allowing these things to happen? Because they don't usually have recourse,
Right. Well
but
said.
health, safety and welfare.
Yeah.
And that's what we're about.
so.
Wow.
So anyway, we'll continue to pursue that. Keep moving.
Dr. Lau has a-
Oh, talk about that.
What is the definition of, what you just talk about the access building?
Accessory dwelling unit?
I mean, the definition, as an access building, what's the definition? That include a ADO, what else, anything else? So,
I mean, an accessory structure can be something like a garage, a shed, a carport, patio. It can encompass all sorts of things.
an ADO is, so on my lot,
Mhm.
people are asking me to buy and sell my house all the time.
Mhm.
You got 3 lots. So I can build 3 ADO.
No, you have to have a primary structure for each,
I got a primary structure
Only on one lot.
only on one lot though.
on one lot.
Yeah, so if you had 3 houses, you could build 3 ADUs.
So I can build 3 houses and 3 ADO,
Uh-huh.
so I can rent it out 6 units.
Yeah.
Damn. Do I have any investor?
You gotta build the primary structure though, Doc.
Doesn't matter. Do I have an investor? I can build.
You gotta build a good sized house first, and then you can build your little
Village.
ADU, yeah, your little village.
Village over the falls.
Damn.
Okay. Well, I will pursue those then. And then just one other thing, this isn't a UDO amendment, but I wanted to let you know, in light of the church rezone, we're going to add to the online application list of required materials that if you are only zoning a portion of a property, you have to come with a legal description as part of the application materials. So we're gonna add that in there. It doesn't need added in the UDO, it just says as the rules permit and from the planning commission, so. I'm
With
gonna do,
regards to the long-term rentals, a question for our council. How do you enforce and or litigate exceeding the rental percentage in, say, a subdivision? Let's say we were set it at 20%. It hits 20%, someone else purchases a house or an investment property. How do you defend that?
One of the things we're looking at, and I'm pretty interested in how Fisher is dealing with that very problem. You have a litany of issues which are coming around, not the least of which being fair housing act problems, right? If the person, if they're
good point.
permitted units, right? Or they're left, is that somebody who may be subject to protection under the FHA, right? You can have some discriminatory analysis there. So it's one of the things we're digging into. On the long-term rental side, because the law in Indiana code is so much less clear about what you can and can't prohibit. It's a bit of a bigger ask, but that's one of the things we're working through.
So is there the possibility for us to go ahead and implement a percentage, let's say 10% of a subdivision or less for rentals in the short term and then move or adjust it from that point?
I would counsel at this point not to do that. If for no other reason than we haven't set up any enforcement mechanisms for such an action, right? It's a.
Or program.
You mean a program or, I think that this is something which is gonna have longer term ramifications. I mean, if you were to take the Fisher's approach, right, where we're asking people to register at the point of sale, this is something that's gonna take a while to come fully into effect. So we would like a little time to see how they play this through.
Okay, along Brad's same line, we've got 10 homes up here, and Brad and Kyle own 2 of them, so there's 20%, okay? I own a home, I wanna rent it. But I can't,
Under the current
Maybe it's 20%.
Yeah. Under the current version of the UDO, you certainly could. I think that is one of the things that the Fishers model is trying to address. I candidly haven't figured out how they.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know how they've got
That's a
comfortable
little
with it
headache.
yet.
Yeah.
But it's
That's not
also,
to say that there's not a way to get comfortable with it. I haven't seen that maybe.
it's also a legal headache again for property owners when they have to have a quorum if it's an HOA driven community, which is another legal headache. And that also can play into fair housing as well. Because these people have a right to have their HOA proceedings, which are governed, right, by some law.
Yeah.
But yet, if then on that flip side, they can't do that because of this predicament. So see, it's two things colliding.
Yeah.
And the hand and the glove are not fitting.
So an HOA is an HOA voting right allocated based upon the number of lots that an individual owns? Or is it allocated based upon being an owner?
I think it's per dwelling unit to make
Being
up the
an owner.
quorum for
Like
a
condos,
HOA.
Kendall Point condos, one owner, one vote. No rentals in their HOA. You can own 10 of them or whatever, buy them, but you can't rent any of them out.
And they establish that themselves through their HOA?
Yeah, through Must and HOA.
Yeah.
Bottom line, we need to move to registration,
Yeah.
Or something. We
get
need to
started with that.
See how that works.
So who's going to put together a strategy or a plan to address this? That fall to,
I mean, it's within, our department looking long-term and
Okay.
how it interacts with the UDO and our existing town code and ordinances.
Say like Fishers fight that battle.
Yeah, and then we'll take the scraps. Yeah, we'll take the scraps and do that. Yeah,
But I think we,
Learn
the
from their
bottom line
mistakes.
is, no matter what direction we go, we need to start with registration. Because as more and more new homes come in, if you're not, I don't want to be behind the eight ball if there is a
And that
model that's
under-
worked out. Yeah, so.
and that under the auspice of we need to know how to get a hold of the landlord and
Exactly.
we need to
Yeah.
make sure we can do
Yeah.
inspections if a new tenant comes in, so there's not mold and
And
nonsense.
council, that'd probably be a separate ordinance than the
Yeah,
UDO.
certainly if we're gonna take enforcement.
Yeah. All right.
Gotcha.
and the landlord will pay the fee for the inspections with the new leasing agreement.
That's what they do. I believe that's what they do. And we did look at this earlier. It's been probably back to during the COVID days. We looked at this. And I guess there is a fee with it, annual registration fee.
I mean, that's what we do with our short terms. I mean, it's only $50, but
Yeah.
Go on, Tim.
I'm not paying any fees.
you can put them all on one card, just one fee, all properties.
So if somebody comes in and wants power, if I bought a house, I don't come and change my utilities over, you don't ask me questions, do you?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Etta and Tracy.
So questions.
I walk in and say, I want to get the power turned on at 500 Main Street.
So if it is a tenant occupied home, they have to provide a copy of the lease.
How do you know?
Change of ownership.
Because of the
they'll
property
ask for-
records.
They have to either have to have a
You got
lease
it on file?
or they have to have
Mhm.
have a copy of the deed, the purchase agreement or whatnot. So whether it's owner or tenant, you have
That's,
to provide proof of,
you know that.
yes, they will have, and they keep it in record as well.
So I tell my people to take the lease to town.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, they cannot sign them up for a copy
Yeah.
of
we
utility
have-
account without.
Can we have a record of that in there so that we can, if they move out, we put the power back in your name or water back in
I
your
got
name?
that.
Yeah.
If I buy a house just off the market, I'm gonna live in it. I just walk in and say, hey, I want the power turned on.
They gotta have copy of the deed or
Or it has to
closing
be-
statement or something showing that you're the owner.
Or we could look it up on the GIS and it'll tell us. If you're
And
the,
usually that they're-
that's a lag.
There's a lag.
Granted, that's a lag.
The current.
Yeah.
Can you resurrect the current volume of rentals in the core of Pendleton.
Resurrect what?
The count. He wants to know how
We
many.
talked
Yeah, we
about
said we'd do that.
having the data again. I'd be
Yeah.
really curious our next meeting to know
Yeah.
how many single family structures there are in core Pendleton, excluding new subdivisions. And then what percentage of those are rentals today?
Mhm.
We get a,
I can tell you about 150 real quick.
But what's the base of the total number of single family houses?
I mean, I would say most of our rentals are probably gonna be in the downtown core. There's probably not a lot in like Huntsinger, Cary Glen, the Falls, things like that.
There's some, they're popping up.
Some, sure, but
We've got a corporate in my neighborhood and,
Facebook Marketplace every week.
and it's a corporate owned and it's not the correct corporate owned if you call, cause that's a unlisted number now.
yeah, we could have the utility office run a report on EMS real easy.
mhm. What is that, EMF?
UMS,
Okay,
I mean, it may not be 100% accurate, like you mentioned, lots of the owners may keep the utilities in their name. That way they don't have that, risk of getting things disconnected.
That's also the way we should avoid reinspection fees. By maintaining continuity on the utilities and rolling the utilities into the rental. So that you can change renters without having to transact the,
yeah.
The inspection and prompt inspection.
I'm also gonna say most of those are probably, unless they're, some of these buildings be single family, cause I'm sure it doesn't list the building type, you know? And we only have a few multifamily zones, so I'm gonna assume 99% of them are single family homes.
so if I take an old house and begin renting
Mhm.
rooms in it, does that require registration with the town?
Rooms in it for long term? Well, it would be a long term, right now? No. No, we don't have a long term rental program. Ready to vote on your amendments? Okay. All right. So, oh, public comment, public hearing. That's right. Thank you.
We can go ahead and open the public hearing on the UDO amendments or corrections now. Stephanie, you have any online anyway? Do I have any questions or comments? Billy?
To the podium.
It's Pat.
Hey, let me ask you this, on Baker's Point out here. When the developer, and you proved it, we all signed it, whatever, did the statements say that they were gonna sell to individual people? Reason I ask, the developer, Cary Glen, built one outside of Houston and sold it to a huge conglomerate, and they took every home in there and rented it out. So do we need to have something in there that if they do us,
They have a condition on their rezone that every, every long-term rental has to be approved by their HOA. And it has to be registered with their HOA.
But they are the HOA at build, correct?
There's nobody living there, is what Willie said. You could come in here and get a subdivision approved and not have one house built.
I think,
Willie Bowles could come here and buy all 600 homes, lots tomorrow.
yeah, no, you're not wrong. I'm saying we
see,
do
the
have,
same thing happened with condos. Luston built the condos. They started the HOA. They governed the HOA until people had an election a couple years later. And then they put their own people in.
Okay.
So.
I mean, I see your point, certainly. But no, I don't think that was not a condition. And I think that, there was a discussion about percentage of having rentals in there, and Brian, too, very rightly said that there's no mechanism to get into fair housing. Try to limit that at this point. But, you know, maybe council can answer this better than I can. Is there anything, law-wise in place that would reflect something like that, like sales must be to, there's an individual owner or what have you, or is that kind of in the same
single-family
vein
homes.
as what we're dealing with right now, trying, like that Fishers is trying to do? Or is there something
Yeah.
like that where we can enforce it?
I'm not aware of anything. I'm certainly not aware of any prohibitions on selling to, you know, corporate or fictitious entities, right, LLCs or whatever, which would be authorized under code. Whether or not, I do think the transference process from the developers to the individuals in the HOA is an interesting question. I haven't really thought through yet. Further conversation with planning staff about that, but where I've seen this in the past, it's largely been by way of the bylaws of the HOAs. So it would be crafty to come in preemptively to amend that such that you can transfer it and rent everything out without, before anybody gets in to change it. But I'd have to look into that further before I could give you that.
Yeah, if I owned all 600 homes, I'd be the president of the HOA. So.
Right. Yeah, and you change the bylaws for anybody else to buy the other house. You have.
I don't know, it's just something we probably look into.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
We'll have more residential subdivisions come in, so, you know, if that's something that we learn and we need to do, then we even have the ability to do it at that point. Yeah, I'm also not aware of a mechanism that, I'm like, would it go in a code book? Is it even state statute where you do something like that?
Well, setting aside where it goes, I'm not sure enforceability or something.
That's another good point.
We have our monthly orders,
Very true.
things to look at.
It's gonna be a huge lawsuit when it happens.
In Fishers.
Interesting. That's right.
Somebody's gonna challenge it.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they're already challenging.
These guys have billions of dollars behind the fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the other thing that the benefit of sitting back and watching them. I mean, I'll be looking pretty closely at their ordinances and seeing what, because they know that that's coming down the pipe too, right? And they're going to want to cover up their actions, you know, under the veil of Indiana code as much as possible, and just kind of, oftentimes when you look at those ordinances, you can kind of see how they got comfortable with where they ended up. And so, yeah, it's something we'll monitor pretty closely.
I wouldn't be surprised if that city hired someone to lobby and change state statutes,
It's certainly.
especially with the
Have
fair
the
housing.
ordinance example that they had, we put it in your Teams folder. If you want me to send you a copy, I can too. But that was the kind of information that we had found. I think there's a news article and then the actual ordinance as well.
As much as we want to get ahead of this, we have to let the bigger cities fight it first
Yeah,
financially.
right. Yeah. So, anyway, any other comments? Did we close the public hearing? We have not closed the public hearing.
Close the public hearing.
Now you can vote.
I would maybe perhaps a motion to continue the 2 agenda items related to the short-term law. And then
Right.
take
So
action.
we're just gonna vote on one, 1, 2, and 3, and 4.
1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3.
This is it.
1, 2, 3. Well, 6 doesn't need a vote, so 1, 2, 3.
Just 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
I'll make a
Continue
motion.
4, 5.
So can I have a motion to approve the UDO changes as stated in omnibus,
Omnibus.
omnibus, whatever the word is. I went to Madison Heights, I guess. 1, 2, and 3 as stated. Ben,
As presented.
as presented. Thanks, Carol. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Kyle. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Great.
So, that for you?
Do we need to
The
vote
only
to
other
consider 4, 5?
update I have is Wawa has submitted their site plan, so we're in review stages of that. That's the only site plan I got.
Nothing from the hotel?
No, they're not ready yet. They submitted their secondary plat, roughly over a month ago. And we got comments back to them probably 2 weeks ago, so they're just kind of updating based on those comments, and then they'll do it into site plan. So they're gonna plat it into pieces first and then build on one side.
When it came through PCA, for their variances.
What about the gas station at the roundabout?
Yeah, what about Kilcarney's? Nothing there?
Kilcarney, we have North Heritage Way gonna be getting underway for the first phase of development. The gas station has been pretty silent. We've had some back and forth based on their first submission. I don't know if they're going through staff changes or rethinking things. It's been a little hard to get a hold of.
Where is the Wawa? It's different.
It's behind CVS on 67. And catty corner.
Next to O'Reilly's.
It wraps around.
The Wawa is a super cool gas station.
This one.
Any other questions or comments?
I think so too.
You gotta have some.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, Tim.